Welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things cube but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka UberBear, and today I'm joined by my other host,
May, also known as Magic.
Hi Magic, how's your day going on this wonderful Sunday recording that we're doing together?
My day's going pretty good. Working on cards, working on game, working on cube, as I do.
Yeah, so we've got a pretty cool thing that, May and I love to do and talk about thematic construction and how to take a vision and turn it into reality. But before we go any further down that conversation, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube. May, what are you having to drink today?
I am having a Cabernet Sauvignon by Barefoot. It is a cheap red wine. I'm going to be the wine snob this time.
Was that Simply Red, the guy that was like, red? I am having a little bit of Tito's, orange juice, and fresh squeezed lime. It's nice and hot. I don't know how it is where you are, but holy cow, man, the temperature's crushing it. And I am hiding in the air conditioner, and this just seemed like the most refreshing thing that I could have today. All right, so we're going to talk about an interesting cube design. I don't know about the rest of you cubers out there, but I know one thing that May and I do. We think of a lot of ideas, and then we brainstorm and we ponder and we try to come up and figure out how we can realize a concept, no matter how strange it is. And before I even introduce what we're talking about, May, what is your experiences with that idea, that concept?
My experiences is that I tend to pick up too many projects because the impulse, I have a good idea. And then I try to go through the effort of maybe considering making what's I'm looking for, like not a proxy page, but like a dummy page on CubeCopter just to see what it would look like. And then after a while, I've just dropped off, I would say 80% of the projects that I just started just to see if I could do it.
I do the same thing.
I have a problem.
I've got an elephant graveyard of cubes on my CubeCobra, and I don't want to let them go. But like when I come up with an idea, I just and oftentimes this is because in my line of work, I'm behind the wheel a lot, or I'm listening to some cool music, and I just get an inspiration, and I'm like, oh man, this would be a really cool idea for a cube. How can I realize this concept? And that's kind of what happened in this situation. I was hanging out with, this is a little bit different here. I'm hanging out with my buddy Christian, hanging out with my son on a Saturday night. And we've got Monopoly, the video game, on my Xbox, which is pretty sweet. And we're doing kind of the live action where all the pieces are moving and rolling of the dice are popping on the screen, and got the auctions and the taxing and all these things. It's just really cool. The dog barks. And believe it or not, the Xbox game is speaking to me while I'm playing. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make this into a cube. And I did. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how you can take an idea, I don't know, like a book or a game or some other story element, and turn it into a game using Scryfall's advanced search and then realize a vision. And in this particular case, in the Monopoly, as I have named it, it's the dark underworld of the rich and powerful and those who want to leave the poverty behind and chase those endless riches, and no matter what the cost is. That was the vision of the game, and it really sets that tone for me of Monopoly, which is a game I personally enjoy. It's a game that doesn't have, it has a huge fan base, but then it has those detractors as well, right? It's an infamous game and a famous game all in one. When you come into family game night and you want to say, hey guys, you want to play Monopoly, you can get some groans at the dinner table. So I decided, how can I make that into something fun and exciting? So I have decided.
I'm making Monopoly.
I'm making Monopoly. And I'm going to make you like it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you like Monopoly. And as a matter of fact, comedy is that my buddy Christian, he loves Monopoly. And I like Monopoly. I enjoy it very much. But our good friend Chris, a.k.a. Sandwich, he actually has said on multiple occasions, I can't stand Monopoly. I hate this game. And he recently got to Cube with this cube, and he's like, well, I like this Monopoly. This is cool. And he even gave some commentaries because we got to draft it this past week. He was like, I wouldn't have done this. I can't believe you did this. I'm actually enjoying this. This is just not the type of cube that I would have thought to have taken on, because this was complicated. And I'll explain why. I'm going to kind of go over some bullets here. So it's a 216 card, 4-player desert cube design. And what I used, included in the show notes, is I used the Dragons of Winter's Night by ChillMTG, who has a beautiful cube that you have to check out. And I'll leave all those, I'll link it in the show notes for everybody to check it out. But I used his multipliers to figure out how many lands I needed in a desert cube environment. And this is the first time I've ever taken on anything like this. And I think that's a lot where Chris's comment came from, is a desert cube it's very technical, because anyone that's not familiar with what a desert cube is, you have to draft your lands in the draft. So you're looking at, you may be passing around some bombs, some very important fixtures in the draft, yet you need to be taking 5 to 6 lands in order to achieve your minimum of 15 to 17 to actually play the game of Magic. May, have you ever actually played a desert cube? Are you familiar with that design concept?
I'm familiar with the design concept. I haven't gotten a chance to play it yet, but I will.
Yes, you will.
I will. But in my opinion, the things that I've really appreciated about desert cube design and how it translates into some thematic decisions into your cube environment is, especially in the Monopoly cube, is it can contribute to flavor. The fact that you are in a Monopoly cube and the whole point of it is to gather up lands and to draft your lands, the lands matter in this draft, is a really good flavor win. And when you're talking about an overarching idea of, I want to make Monopoly cube, you can't just bypass the fact that you're trying to collect land. That's the whole point of, like, Monopoly.
Yeah, so the drafters, the way I've designed it, as I said before, it's 216 cards. It's 4 players, so it kind of follows that 180 two-brick concept, right? It's 3 packs of 18 is what the players are going to draft. So the whole cube's getting passed around. The pieces within the cube, they're intended to signal, specifically the cards I chose, is they're economic. Everything on it has to be something economic. And it'll make sense when you look at the list. And it's a murder mystery happening simultaneously. So I kind of did elements of Clue. And by the way, Clue's the next one that I'm destined to design, May. Just TBD. But
I would love a Clue-based...
I am. I'm all over it. If you and I want to collaborate on that idea, that'll be awesome, because I enjoy doing this one. Yeah, Clue would be fun, because just imagine...
Because Clue is my cup of tea. That is my territory. That is my game. It is my game enough that my family restricted me from having both the extra card, because it would be a weird number of players, and they would always have one more card than me, and I wouldn't even have the checklist, just because the struggle of trying to remember everything handicapped me just enough so it was fair. And but the point is that is a concept I would absolutely love to work on you with.
Yeah, we'll see if we can bring that to life, because I like taking these old well-known board games and see if I can convert them into some kind of Magic thematic scene. And you'll see that happening here. And one of the things that I did in this, besides doing Desert, which was really weird for me, is also did a thing I've never done before as a curator, and I broke Singleton for very key pieces. I specifically broke it for the lands, and also broke it for stuff like Go to Jail, which we'll talk about here shortly. And it was because they were the key elements that I wanted. It was my cheeky way of doing signpost, because as May said, in Monopoly, you have anywhere from pairings of 2 to groupings of 3 that signal your lands as you buy your properties all the way up to your hotels, and you put your houses on that. So I tried to find ways to personify or metaphorically bring that to life through Magic the Gathering. This was really fun. And one of the things that I used, and it actually worked out to my favor, my crutch in all this is doing the lands and all that, is I went with treasures as the central theme. Even though it pays off from a thematic standpoint, it's still kind of my quote-unquote crutch to get me out of it in case anybody fell short on the draft. And we'll talk about how that recently happened in the game. Someone tried to break it. Also, the games are slower and they're more intricate. We didn't put time on our recent draft. It did take longer for players to do it, but I did ask, and I watched, myself and Chris Moore, we sat out while our other friends, some had never drafted this before, and just watched their lines of play so I could take feedback. And everyone was happy. I didn't get any cards set to the side saying this has no purpose here, has no reason. But the games were definitely more strategic in their placement, no fast. There is an aggro-ish package that our good friend Christian has latched onto. And when I define aggro for most people, it's going to be really interesting and strange. His strategy to aggro is to run lands that do not tap, and I'll explain why that is shortly. Well, matter of fact, let's get to it now. What I did as a design element in this is all of my non-basic lands, and I believe there are 82 of them, specifically enter the board tapped. And those come from New Capenna and they come from Strixhaven. And it's because they have that secondary effect of, you can scry, pay X and scry, and you can also pay the X value, which I think is 4 on both of them, to either draw or scry. And the reason why I'm doing that is to not make them feel Guildgate-ish, but I also want them to be able to be tapped for value as the game progresses later in the game. But what this has done is it's increased the value of the treasures for the fast speed. Does that make sense, May, when I say that? It's really accentuated them. And there's a reason for that, too. May, would you mind taking on this next one underneath the lands enter tapped? Because that'll make sense and it'll tie in pretty nicely there.
Yeah, this is actually a topic that I'm quite familiar with because I use treasures for a lot of things, for things outside of Cube like EDH. I use them in Cube. They are just so good for that color fixing and weaponizing the treasures and being able to make win cons out of the treasures. They are a very flexible, very good mechanic for a lot of environments. And what the Monopoly Cube is able to take advantage of, which I appreciate, is how it weaponizes the treasures into a valuable resource. And I can see why an aggro package would exist that takes advantage of those treasures rather than just relying on those tapped lands, because when lands are already going to be a coveted resource, and having tapped lands and focusing on, treasures is going to be huge.
Yeah, so one of the things, too, is it creates this tension within the game. This is what I like about it, is you have to make a decision with your treasures. Do you use them to continue your march towards, winning and such that you want to cast your spells, your next threat? Or do you reserve your treasures and slow down on your backfield utilizing your lands as your resources to move so that you can go for an alternate win con, say like Revel in Riches, etc. So it really creates this interesting tension within this draft environment, and I was watching players feel that too. Cracking their treasures wasn't something I would see them some people were doing like virtual savings accounts of their treasures. Others, like Christian, when he got a treasure, he'd crack it to advance the next threat on the board, but then it came at a cost in his gameplay too, because the other player was more patient and got the bigger threat. It really creates this interesting dynamic that I'm very proud of, and I got to see it the other day, and it was so exciting to watch as a curator. One of the things, too, about this environment, it's not archetype-driven. The archetypes, you could call them that if you wanted to. You could do your traditional paper, rock, scissors. You can do your aggro, mid-range control. Sure, that exists in some form and fashion, but there's no secret hidden signpost, not really, that says if you grab this card, it's going to pull you in a direction. This is more of an open world play, and I drive it around story and player immersion. While my players are playing it, they're not feeling like, hey, I'm the aristocrats or anything like that. Even though there's some kind of vibe to that, like extort and stuff, it's not intended to feel that way. Instead, they're feeling like they're playing Monopoly and they're bankers. They're getting pulled into this world. Meanwhile, some of the cards are really cueing, New Capenna being responsible for this, a murder mystery type of thing, a situation where a plot is unfolding in the dynamics of the card. I was very choice in what goes in here, so that you can also feel like you're coming out of the struggle, the economy is really pulling you, but at the same time, something seedy is happening in the background. May, if you check that out, or you get that vibe?
Oh yeah, I definitely do. And the thing that I appreciate about it being less archetype driven is that it gives a lot more room for creativity and meta development within your environment in a way that other environments can't recreate. And I think that is a cornerstone to good cube design, is when it's not always just a matter of giving your players aha moments because you've given it to them, but sometimes it's a matter of giving them aha moments because you've given them a select amount of cards that all can overlap with each other to some degree, and then letting them figure out what archetypes, what kind of directions that they're making. For example, Chris figuring out a way to build an aggro deck out of this.
Yeah, so one of the things, too, that I've hidden, so it's full of Easter eggs, right? And I'm enjoying that. At this point, the jig is up in my group. They've seen the Easter eggs, and we'll talk about some of these. I put the cards in here that represent the game pieces, and we're going to cover those shortly. And then there's cards that do taxation. There's monetary names like Windfall, where the looks like coins all over the ground, and treasures. So the whole environment's really not only the art pulling you that way, the names are pulling you in that way. It's just really interesting. It's an immersion experience, and my group, very much like when we played the Munson Cube, the 180 Jun, and we put on metal music. This time it was and they were getting immersed into that, that roar, that throat screaming music. and they were into that just crushing and turning Jund really aggro. This one's more of saving pennies, pinching pennies, if you will. You should have seen the dynamics within the gameplay. It was really interesting. The choices that people are making, and then we're going to talk about some of those interesting dynamics as we move through. And like I said before, the land package, once my players got it, and most people will get it, it's just Desert Cube takes a little bit of tuning. You might need a plains or a white, so you have to take an azorius colored land, but you don't actually need the blue in that land. It's something you have to tune yourself into because it's desert. You're just basically going to grab the lands you need to complete your color sets that you require, and you're going to have some off-color stuff. And as a result of that, it can take you down that rainbow of splashing too. Incidentally, right? It makes cards have value outside of the scope. From a design perspective, like the 40,000 feet in the air, as I said before, this cube is 216 cards designed for 4 players. And then the breakdown, just the numerical breakdown, as Cube Cobra can do, and if anybody's not familiar with this, you can go to your tables, is it's 59 creatures, 17 instants, 22 sorceries, 32 artifacts, and that doesn't even count all the treasures and stuff getting made. Those are the invisible. But 80 lands, 37% of the cube is actually lands. And I did that using, like I said, ChillMTG's Dragons of Winter's Night, which is going to be featured at CubeCon, as a model to try to get a ratio so that I could match it to he's at a 360, so then I wanted to come down to this. And then I compensated using treasures as that crutch piece, taking this to basically 216. Originally, when I developed the cube, it wasn't 216. I expanded it out. I was doing 3 packs of 15, but I found that 3 packs of 18 is just cleaner for this environment. It lets the whole cube get drafted. My original number just didn't sync up very well. All right, so we're going to move over to the pieces. These are the Easter eggs, and I guess by the definition of Easter egg, I'm telling everybody what they are. And it was supposed to be like when we're going to play as friends, I wanted everybody to chuckle as they grabbed a piece, or maybe they don't chuckle at all because they don't know.
So one thing that I really appreciate about when it comes to designing off of a whole concept like you did for the Monopoly Cube is it's building your layers for your environment in a way that adds layers, like an onion or an ogre. And part of those layers is that you have this mechanical layer of it's a desert cube. You are trying to hunt for those lands. You're trying to bring in those lands. You're trying to get those treasures. It's both a way that you can illustrate that mechanical idea of I am generating resources off of my lands and my treasures in order to progress and win the game. That is the mechanical translation of Monopoly, and when you're able to translate that from here's the cube that I'm wanting to make to here's a mechanic that happens to match what I'm trying to do, from there you can add the flavor and the segue into our next piece about the pieces of Monopoly. And this cube is dripping with flavor. It is not just enough to say this is a Monopoly cube because it's a desert cube and it has treasures. But, like you said before, you have all those very literal monetary names like Windfall, lots of tax cards, taking that mechanical and flavor approach and merging them onto this nice, beautiful little onion of a cube. And when we have these pieces of Monopoly, being able to go through the card and understand what you're trying to translate into that theme, it gives me a good chuckle. Like, my favorite one on our list under the show notes so far has been Fleet Wheel Cruiser, because it is the direct translation of the little car piece. And I absolutely adore that being included here.
Yes, that's one of my hidden Easter eggs, actually. Would you mind telling the group what the Fleet Wheel Cruiser does, actually? We got a little bit of time with it, probably, for those that aren't familiar, because there are some of these are going to be staples-esque, and some of these are going to be totally obscure, weird cards.
Fleet Wheel Cruiser is a 4-cost vehicle, 5/3 with trample haste. When it enters the battlefield, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn, and it has a crew cost of 2. It is generically just good 4-drop aggressive creature. It can go in pretty much any deck, and what's able to be translated in a desert cube like this is that even though that there are going to be a lot of colorless cards, because, you know, land selection is going to be at a premium here. It's going to be something they have to fight for. Having generic open options to turn sideways with are very, very good here. And translating vehicles is just the perfect choice here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was actually intentional. I agree with what you're saying because your lands are coming into play tapped, the haste aspect of this may be way later in the game than one might traditionally expect. And that's why your treasures and utilizing cards that fast forward you by getting treasures on the field will allow you to get this out faster, right? To maintain
Mm-hmm.
that aggro concept. The next one, and that was one, as I lay these down, these are the Easter eggs. So if any of you want to draft with me at CubeCon, spoilers up, I'm giving you the Easter eggs. But it is fun to watch my play group the other night when they're drafting these around. I saw them giggle and smile as the cards getting passed around, and they kind of knew what I was doing, but I didn't make a big announcement to everybody. This is what you're looking for, so it gave me the lulls as a curator. They went, I see what you did there. Spirited Companion. That's the dog representation as the Monopoly piece. And for one colorless and one plains, you get a 1/1 enchantment creature dog. When Spirited Companion enters the battlefield, draw a card. Plain and simple, it's a cute little Shinu Inu, and it's really cute. And it's whatever. It's just the cute little dog bouncing around town, exactly like it should be after you've rolled your dice. Oh, and I actually need to back up a little bit too. It's important to note that I ask my players, I've got those big, dumpy Amazon dice. They're huge, 6-sided dice. That this is how you're going to decide how the matches that are determined.
Hilarious.
And I do this in the stuff like go to jail and all that too. Like I pass around those dice. Everybody's using those dice. It's very intentional. But Spirited Companion represents the little dog, just like the Fleetwheel Cruiser represented the little race car in traditional Monopoly. May, would you mind taking over the one in the middle there, please?
Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. It is a 5-cost vehicle with flying. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls with a crew cost of 3, and it has 6/5. It is just your literal translation of a ship.
It is the battleship, absolutely. And the planeswalker, that's just kind of it's additive distraction. I don't run planeswalkers in this cube environment. That would just be too much. But
I mean, dealing 3 to a target creature whenever it attacks or enters the battlefield is still really big. So
I saw this get used effectively the other day, but it's funny because it's actually more vulnerable than you think it is. I've got cards that deal with it from both being an artifact perspective, and I also have problem, removal in here too. So it won a game the other night as I watched, and I'll kind of talk about that shortly. But it wasn't like this is a big bomby threat, but it is the battleship, the little Monopoly piece moving around the field. So it kind of makes sense to me, at least in my head. Next one that I have, and this one here, actually, May, would you mind taking over this one, and I'll explain what this one is if you haven't figured it out already?
I have not figured it out, but
All
I
right,
am
let's
curious.
go. I'm going to let you read the card, and then I'm going to tell you what it is.
So here you have Ethereal Investigator, which is the 3 and a blue for a spirit creature with flying, 2/3, and when it enters the battlefield, investigate X times, where X is the number of opponents you have. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying.
Okay.
You're going to have to clue me in.
I'm going to clue you in.
It's going over my head.
All right, over my head. Now look at the character. Look at the art. What is he wearing? On his head. On his head. I heard that.
A top hat and a monocle. All right.
Bang.
It's the Monopoly guy. All right.
and it counterplays to the. It's also the hat piece. I kind of got both. It's Mr. Warbucks.
It's the ghosts of the Monopoly man.
It is. It's Mr. Warbucks. It's Mr. Money. Mr. Moneybags. Excuse me. It's Mr. Moneybags. And it's also the top hat. So I kind of dual rolled this one. And then this next one, not a good Magic card. But I actually love the fact that the art is 100% on point. And it's Diamond Mare. For 2 colorless, you get an artifact creature horse. It's a 1/3. As Diamond Mare enters the battlefield, choose a color. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen color, you gain 1 life. It is a beautiful, shiny mare, which is the horse, or rather, I guess it's the stallion that's leaning back is the Monopoly piece. But because it was silver, I'm like, I got to put this in. So, got to cover that. We've got the dog. We've got the battleship. We've got the race car. We've got the top hat / as she said, Mr. Moneybags, and the hat, by the way. And then we have the horse. The one that you might notice that's missing. May, do you notice anything that's missing? Because there is one piece missing from traditional Monopoly. It's not a quiz.
I can't think of it, but it's been driving me nuts.
There was actually 2 of them. It's the iron, and it's the iron, and it's the plow, the original plow with the wheel on it. Those are both not in here because I couldn't find pieces.
And Colossal Plow?
Yeah. A Colossal Plow I had looked at, and it's on my short list, and I may add it in eventually. And I also looked at Yeah, and I looked at Swords to Plowshares for a few minutes, but so that was a little too strong. So those are the two pieces that I'm currently missing from this set, but I will work on it. So listeners, if you have any ideas, I'm looking for a card that fits this theme of this environment. So please look at the environment. I'm looking for a plow, and I'm looking for an iron that also fits the goofiness of what I'm trying to project here, that doesn't break the environment. So if you have any
That's
ideas,
one thing that's cool about an environment like this is because you're trying to build not just this thematic idea, but you're building in an essence its own plane, and you're treating this like your own variation of a set of your own variation of this plane, this idea, this story that you're trying to translate across. And as Magic gets new cards and develops, it introduces new things for you to look for in ways that other creators might not be looking for. And I think that's really cool. Like,
yes,
the fact that if somebody came out,
it gets really weird for you and I.
the fact that we can get really excited because a character has a top hat and a monocle says a lot.
So let's go over our next pieces. These are the next Easter eggs. Those are the playing pieces. Now I'm going to represent the railroads of Monopoly. And if anybody's familiar, let's talk about the railroads. You got Pennsylvania, you got Short Line, you got B&O, and you got Reading Railroad. And basically the rent was, when you land on it, $25. But if you had two of them, it was $50. If you had three of them, it's $100. But when you got those four, it's $200 every time somebody landed on them. So they had this cumulative growth value. Well, what I've done with this is I've represented those railroads with trains. And as a result of that, I've now seen two drafts where two players have laughed because they're like, I drafted the train deck.
That would be me.
Yeah. Would you mind taking on this first train, please? And we'll call this B&O Railroad.
I am a big fan of this card. Just before we start, it is Untethered Express. It is a vehicle for 4. It's a 4/4 with trample, and it has a crew cost of 1. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. I am a big fan of like creatures that scale and dodge board wipes.
Absolutely.
I love to see it.
This next one's going to be Pennsylvania Railroad, or rather known as Capenna Express. For 3 colorless and 1 forest, get an artifact vehicle. Sacrifice a treasure. Capenna Express becomes an artifact creature until the end of turn. Crew 3 for a 6/6. This creates this one of those cards that creates that tension of I'm going to sacrifice my treasures to bring this thing to life, but at what cost, right? Is this? I'm up because it doesn't have any evasion. I just want to point that out. It is a vanilla 6/6. So it has to be really choice when you decide to do this thing.
Hey, there's your point for Diamond Mare. It can block the train.
It can. That's too funny. The next one's going to be Short Line Railroad. May, would you mind taking this one on, please?
Renegade Freighter. It's another vehicle from Kaladesh for the cost of 3. It's a 4/3 with crew 2, and whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1 and trample until at the end of turn. Again, it's just another thing that can dodge board wipes. I'm not sure how prevalent board wipes are in your environment, but
they're pretty medium. They're small. I'll talk about that too, but I am running stuff that actually will get these two. It's intentional.
Dodging creature-based removal, and it has evasion, is all I need to see on a card to know this is something that I would want to play.
Absolutely. And then I'll do the final railroad, which is going to be Reading Railroad. Reading Railroad is also known as the Aradara Express. For 5 colorless, get an artifact vehicle 8/6. Menace, crew 4. This is the juggernaut. I mean, this is a big thing. So what I have actually seen players do, and it's been pretty great, is it's happened twice now. And I even drafted this once, and I tried to do it. So I guess I can officially say that 3 times people have tried to build what they're calling the complete set of train deck because they want to get this rolling. So it's pretty funny. So can we call that an archetype, May? Is this going to be officially an archetype?
Yes.
Train dot deck?
Train dot deck should be an archetype. And I almost want to say it would be nice if there was a vehicle payoff.
There is.
There is. Okay, good.
King Makar. I've got King Makar in
Perfect.
here. Huge payoff. Oh, yeah. People have already done that, too.
Collect the trains and get a payoff for having all the trains.
Oh, you don't get anything
Monopoly
free. I give you nothing for free. You have to have drafted King Makar. But King Makar will do work because every time it untaps, you can exile a target. All right, so the next one that I've chosen to represent, everybody's familiar as you're going around the Monopoly board, you've got Community Chest and you have Chance. Well, I've got a couple of cards in here that represent that, but I thought this one here would be really interesting to signify both in one. May, would you mind taking on this card? I figure like this is your type of flavor all day.
It is. It's Treasure Chest. It is a 3 for an artifact. You can pay 4 and sacrifice it and roll a d20. On a 1, you get trapped, you lose 3 life. That's it, you paid 7 total mana to lose 3 life. Let's go. On 2 to 9, you create 5 treasure tokens, which is really good. On 10 to 19, you gain 3 life and draw 3 cards. And on 20, you search your library for a card. If it's an artifact card, you may put it directly into play. Otherwise, put it into your hand and shuffle.
My buddy David was playing this another night, and he goes, I think this card's a trap. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it says it right there, number 1, trapped.
This is the type of card that you have for flavor, even though nobody wants to touch it with like a 5-foot pole.
I'm gonna do it because this is just a goofy set. Now here's a card in here. So when we're talking about like some of these are on the nose and some of them aren't, like using the top hat and Mr. Moneybags is the example when we're talking about that inferior whatever the ghost, the spirit earlier. Well, the same holds true with some of these. I'm being a little metaphorical and being a little cheeky in this cube, and I'm finding things that work. This card here has been very interesting. Horn of Greed. This is what this cube is trying to do, like as a fixture. And for Horn of Greed, you get for 3 colorless, whenever any player plays a land, that player draws a card. This one's interesting. I've seen it played. People are enjoying it. It may be progressing because it has symmetry to this idea. It may be progressing both board states. But if you want it bad enough, and we'll use Christian as an example, whose lands are entering it untapped because he chose to go with basics opposed to non-basics, you can see where a card like this could get you a leading edge because they're a drawing card. They don't have to worry about the setback, and they can keep moving forward. So it's makes for interesting dynamics, this card. At first, I was uncertain about it. Now I'm in love with it. I've seen it play out.
Oh, I love this card. I think it is the perfect personification of what your cube is trying to do and what your cube is trying to represent. The problem is that it's symmetrical, of course, but it has a lot of ways to break symmetry, and I think that makes it good.
So this next one is going to be, it's happened to almost everyone that's ever played Monopoly. I mean, it happens all the time. You think you're doing all right, and then you either roll triple doubles, or you land on it, and that's go to jail. I mean, this card couldn't be any more perfect. This isn't on the nose. It is the nose. And for 1 planes, you get an enchantment. When go to jail enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until go to jail leaves the battlefield. At the beginning of the upkeep of the exiled card's owner, that player rolls 2 6-sided dice. If that person rolls doubles, sacrifice, go to jail. This card has been funny. I actually run 2 of these in the cube, and it is, I'm sitting across and I'm playing my match, and I see Christian and David playing to my left, and I hear one of them going, damn it. And you see him rolling dice.
Trying to get out of jail. Come on. I gotta hit with my diamond mare. Very important.
I know poor Christian has he's used this card. He even ran 2 of them the other night, and we did a 1v1 match in my house, just kind of testing some of the mechanics, which isn't an ideal to play a desert cube, but wanted to test the cards out. And I remember he locked me down twice with these, and the next turn I rolled doubles each time. And he's like, damn it.
Hilarious.
And then I played on him. Yeah, so it's never worked for him. And then a couple of these are on the nose, but I want to would you mind taking on these next 2, May, and I'll explain why they're here?
So, based off of what you've already told me, I can get an idea off of what you're going here for. And by the way, this is why having a good cube intro is important, so that we can translate some of these themes. The next one is Thraben Inspector. It's 1 white for a 1/2 creature, and when it enters the battlefield, investigate. And like you said, there is a sort of crime investigating part to this plane that you developed, and adding flavor to the environment that you are creating to make it your own is so important. And even though Thraben Inspector on paper seems out of place because you're like, whoa, you don't immediately think about this as Monopoly, this is a plane based on Monopoly, and building that flavor of the plane is why it's a great fit here.
Yes, trying to solve a murder mystery of some sorts or whatever's happening. Who knows? Money laundering. Money laundering actually makes more sense. As we move through these cards, you'll see why.
The next card is Buy Your Silence. It is 4 and a white for a sorcery. Exile target non-land permanent, and its controller creates a treasure token. It is a very expensive removal, but it answers everything, and it gives them a treasure.
you gotta pay them off. You're buying their silence.
You gotta pay them off.
And
Flavor is very, very good, and considering that removal's at a premium in this environment, it's going to be pretty good. I really like the flavor of... This isn't just the Monopoly cube, this is the crime syndicate monopoly of a plane that you've developed, like I've said with Thraben Inspector. Building that flavor and building those stories is what we like to see for these flavor-driven cubes.
Correct. And the next one I'll take over, we're going to kind of move over to our blue group. The first card that I've gotten here, and I run this in my artifact cube as well, is Rise and Shine. For 1 colorless and 1 blue, you get a sorcery. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature. Put 4/1/1 counters on it on each artifact that became a creature this way, and then it has the overload where you can pay 4 and 2 blue, and you can basically bring your whole team of non-creature artifacts permanents into basically a giant army, a swelling army.
Oh, here's your train.deck payoff.
yes, it does. And I saw my buddy use this the other day to great effect. He did do it to his train. He also did it to I forget what else he did. He did a couple of goofy things, but mostly treasures is the target that I was kind of chasing. I was trying to give, like, as you collect those treasures and you haven't spent them, this is your savings account, and now you're blowing your entire savings account to attack with a giant treasure army. But that doesn't have to happen. But that's what that overload provides, is a way out. This next piece. Would you mind taking this one on, and I'll kind of explain what I'm doing with this?
I've actually never seen this card. I didn't pay attention to New Capenna, I'm not going to lie. So it's All-Seeing Arbiter. It is 4 blue for a creature avatar. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Whenever you discard a card, a target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-0 until your next turn, where X is the number of different mana values among cards in your graveyard. It is also a 5/4.
So what I'm trying to do here, and I'm being super stretchy metaphorical, besides the fact that this is just a great card and on paper, but the art that I've actually chosen is a full extended art that just does this. And I'm doing it's all seeing. I'm doing kind of the IRS, Big Brother is what I'm trying to do here.
Sure.
And you can see that with the art that I've chosen. So it just kind of plays into that. So when you're going around this, it's, again, the whole world is an economy. And then we've got this murder mystery. So I'm looking for these key artistic pieces that speak to me, but I hope they don't just resonate to me. Because what's been cool about this cube, May, is other than a few little ones that are super dodgy, I haven't had to explain to my players so far what I'm trying to say. I'll ask them, what is this? And they'll kind of like, it seems like, some kind of taxation or somebody overwatching. Like, yeah, it's the IRS.
I mean, I almost directly translated it to the actual personification of a monopoly. Monopoly over all goods and the all-seeing of all goods.
I like that too. I mean, it's whatever the player sees. It all fits within my context. This next one,
good art is up to interpretation.
It is 100%. It's goofy art. May, this one is pretty much on the nose. Would you mind taking this one on?
Stolen Goods. It's 3 and a blue for a sorcery. Target opponent exiles a card from the top of his or her library until the end of turn, until they exile a non-land card. Until the end of the turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Yes, the traditional exile your library, steal your effects before it became red stick.
Now, for the purposes of Oracle, it's target opponent exiles card from the top of their library. I apologize. So I've got this bad habit as I'm grabbing and pinning these cards. I was fast forwarding this one today, and I'm pulling out of Scryfall, but Oracle text is important, so I apologize for that as we move through these. I'll try to correct them as we do it.
No, it just means that non-binary people are immune to the effect. It's fine.
You're like, oh, that card does not work on me. I'm like,
You fool! I use they, them pronouns. Do not refer to me.
That's too funny. The next card I've gotten here, and I love this. Just the flavor is insane. The card is Blood Money. For 5 colorless and 2 swamps, you get a sorcery, destroy all creatures. For each non-token creature destroyed this way, you create a tapped treasure token. And then it says, for the Patriarch class, wealth is in the blood. And I even made it the cover of the cube. May, would you mind taking on this next one? This is one of those payoffs that I was talking about that are subtly hidden within here.
Revel in riches. It's 4 and a black for an enchantment, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure token artifact, and it has tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana. We know what treasure does. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. That's it. It's just, you win the game.
So it creates, this is another one of those tension cards. Do you want to hold out and try to just do a couple of removal pieces and get around to that upkeep? Or do you want to spend your treasures that you're earning from this to progress your board state? The internal tension that this card creates. So I'm a huge fan of this. And this is one of the benchmark pieces that I utilized when I first came up with this idea and it popped in my brain. And I kind of went through my binders. I wasn't certain how I was going to build this cube. And Blood Money is a card that I was flipping through, and I'm like, I have no home for this card ever. I mean, it's a 7-mana board wipe. It's really cool, but I'm like, oh, God, this pretty much is what I'm picturing. And then I had an extra Revel in Riches. So as a curator, as a person that's designing a thematic cube, and you're trying to realize a concept, sometimes maybe just come up with the idea and then flip through your Magic cards that you own. I mean, Scryfall works, right? But for me, it's kind of a chill moment. I can sit in here in my office and just kind of open up my binders and just take cards out. And I'm like, oh, well, that seems like a really good horse. But, then I flip through, I'm like, oh, this is a better horse.
I will also add that what's really nice about these types of cards is that it reinvigorates our excitement in spoiler season in a way that other formats don't have. Because as I've mentioned before, looking for funny man in a top hat and a monocle coming in a new set is exciting, and for us in a way that it might not be for other places. And when we see things like Blood Money, Revel in Riches, etc., that is a direct flavor to a mechanic representation that is perfect for this type of environment. It's exciting, and the reason I mention it is because I have literally an EDH deck that is Feign the Broker, and I have the same exact awesome gimmick where I have things like Blood Money, Revel in Riches, a bunch of these other black cards in here. So my eyes are immediately perked up on this.
And the next story element, so that's kind of going to the left, is the greed aspect, right? That's what I'm trying to project here. But then we've got going back to the murder mystery that's kind of hidden. Whatever you want to tell yourself as you're playing the game, that's fine. But Body Launderer for 2 colorless and 2 black or 2 swamps, you get a creature, ogre, rogue, 3/3. Death Touch. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Body Launderer connives. And that's the one whenever you draw a card, discard a card, it puts a 1/1 counter on it. Something like that. I don't have the text for that. But whenever Body Launderer dies, return another non-rogue creature card with equal or lesser power from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a really neat card in general. And the art is amazing. And this individual's all dressed out in some weird 1920s roaring, the roaring 20s, and it's doing something gross in a morgue. Who knows what's going on here, but it's pretty great. It's New Capenna.
A card I should probably put in my Feign the Broker deck.
Yeah, actually,
totally not just adding it to the list right now.
Okay, so now we're going to move over to our red section. And as I said, I'm just going to profile 3 cards. I want everybody to understand the flavor that I'm trying to do here. And I encourage you to look at this list. And when we go to CubeCon 2023, and I can get 3 other people to join me or just have 4 people, I'd love to see people play this cube and just see the lulls here. This next one, would you mind taking it on, May, please?
Robber of the Rich. It is 1 in a red for a creature human archer rogue with reach and haste, and whenever he attacks, if the defending player has more cards in their hand than you, exile the top card of their library. During any turn you attacked with a rogue, you may cast that card, and you may spend mana as though it were any mana to cast it, and it's a 2/2. It's interesting having a sort of Robin Hood character in here as a de facto we're trying to steal from the rich because it's Monopoly Cube. The people at the top in this plane are oppressive, they're overbearing, they're part of this elaborate crime syndicate to keep them at the top, and Robber of the Rich is a sort of equalizing element, and I really like that in here.
Yeah, it's just a good flavor win. That's why I was choosing these. Sometimes it's the name matters. In this case, it's what it does too. It's just mechanically sound, and it has a name that jives with what I'm trying to do as a curator. This next one I have is Rose Room Treasurer for 3 colorless and 1 red. You get a creature, ogre, warrior, 4/3. Alliance. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a treasure token. If this is the first or second time this ability has resolved this turn, Otherwise, you may pay X. And when you do, Rose Room Treasure deals X damage to any target. Any target being the key word here. This is another odd payoff for those treasures as you do things, right? So you could potentially, do some damage and you can finish people off on the other side, your opponent. So it kind of ties into this next card, Dragon Spark Reactor. This is going back to those payoffs. So as you can see, I want to build this world of you're spending those treasures, and then I want another world where you're saving those treasures. And this is one of those, I might be pseudo saving them, whatever. Dragon Spark Reactor for 1 colorless and 1 mountain, you get an artifact. Whenever Dragon Spark Reactor or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a charge counter on Dragon Spark Reactor. 4, sacrifice Dragon Spark Reactor. It deals 4 damage to the number of charge counters on it to target player, and that much damage to up to 1 target creature. A lot of words. But what this is what it's kind of like that proverbial savings account, even though it's not necessarily the treasures getting piled up. I wanted a card that kind of acted like you've built up all this wealth. Now you're going to pay for and spend it. You see the flavor there, May?
I will add that when it comes to designing a flavor or thematic cube and building those elements between that thematic or mechanical, thematic, and flavor elements and trying to tie them all together, sometimes it's okay to have a bit of a curveball element to them if it helps smooth out the gameplay. And I think Dragon Spark Reactor, even if we don't try to take its flavor at face value, it's something that fleshes out and rounds out the mechanics in a way that is fun, interesting, and engaging. And cards like that are worth putting in. Sometimes it's okay to bend the rules.
And yeah, and 100%. There's the payoff too, but it does enough mechanically on flavor that I can as the curator. You got to remember, as the curator, you make the rules, right? You do the world building. You don't want to put yourself on such tight rails while designing a cube that you confine yourself and stop, stymie your own creativity as the curator. So my advice for anybody that wants to take on something that has no shell, has no mold, don't put so many, lock points on yourself, so many pillars that you can't. Just kind of bring them in as needed. Don't start with the rules and then try to build the cube. Kind of try to build the cube and then set the rules a little loose and then tightening them up and restricting them as you move along. It'll make for a better build, in my opinion. This next one, and I'm going to kind of breeze through these because these are getting to a point. This is kind of the green section. Prosperous Innkeeper. I mean, it's Prosperous Innkeeper. It's a Monopoly board. And the gist is it's a creature. Whenever Prosperous Innkeeper enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. And you get all that for 1 colorless and 1 forest, and you get a 1/1. But it's a neat little card. And it keeps a lot of these creatures, and most of the list, when they enter, makes a treasure token. That's what I wanted to happen here. But this next one, this is a pillar. Whenever I was flipping through my binders and I want to build this cube, this is a pillar of my design. Would you mind taking this one on, please? And I'll explain what it is, May, but I want you to see if you can take a stab at it.
Titan of Industry. It is 4 green, green, green for a creature elemental with reach, trample, and when it enters the battlefield, choose 2. Either destroy target artifact and enchantment, Target player gains 5 life. It's probably going to be you. Create a 4/4 green Rhino Warrior creature token, or put a shield counter on target creature you control, and it's a 7/7 creature. I will add that cards like this are the perfect example of these bomby, top-end, relevant cards that when you see them, they are a star of the cube.
Absolutely. May, I want you to see, okay, I need you to get into the head of Anthony. I need you to get inside my brain. And it's probably going to be a little frightening there, so I pardon. Bring a flashlight. But what do you think I'm trying to do with this artwork? Just guess. Let's see if you can see the vision.
Well, I mean, for starters, it's the Titan of Industry in the Monopoly Cube. It's already a perfect fit. But with this art in particular, it is this sort of... it's hard to explain.
It's a hotel. Is what I won't make you struggle. I'm trying to make a hotel game piece. And then obviously the Titan of Industry. But when they're passing around, my buddies were playing the other night. I saw a few. My buddy David chuckled at this one. He's like, "It's a hotel." I'm like, "Yes, it is."
Yeah, it is. It is your big building piece, and it is perfect because it is the relevant big building piece. It is the star of the cube. It is one of the things that if you're drafting it and you're prioritizing it and you're focusing your strategy on getting it out, it will overperform for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing card. Also, it's important to note, too, that my basic lands that are also seeded into the cube, that's part of the land package, right? Those actually are the New Capenna full arts that I chose that have buildings on them and spires. So every one of those pieces of art is actually like a vista of a cityscape, which is fantastic and just feeds out the flavor even more. This next card in the green section, it's Killer Service. And it's an enchantment, and I'm going to kind of breeze along because it's a lot to read here. And I'll include this in the show notes as in every card that we've talked about. But what's important about this card is you can sacrifice whatever Killer Service into the battlefield, create a number of food tokens equal to the number of opponents you have. So you're going to make a food token. But at the beginning of your end step, you may pay 2 and sacrifice a token. If you do, create a 4/4 green Rhino Warrior token. And I realize I skipped over the casting cost and all that, but what I really wanted to talk about is that last part. That last part is kind of that payoff that I was talking about to the treasures. I saw players sacrificing treasures and then making a Rhino. I saw another player sacrificing, paying the cost, and then sacrificing a treasure, and then crewing the trains. My good friend Bill did that. Yeah.
That's a good point. I haven't considered that. I was too busy trying to think of like how it fits in Flavor Lives with the plane that you're trying to build. But mechanically, I can see how it smooths out a lot of edges that I wasn't considering.
And it's a bunch of rhinos serving a meal. I mean, he's a concierge, so it's pretty great. So we're going to kind of move over. We're going to kind of breeze through. I didn't include all the gold section, but there are a few cards in here that I wanted to highlight before we start closing down here as we build this world of Monopoly. And what I want to do is encourage other people, curators, listeners. I want to challenge you to try to think of your favorite movie, your favorite book, your favorite board game, your favorite video game, and start trying to explain and see if you can design some elements within your cube binders, within your magic binders to start designing a cube. That's what's so fun about this. And not every time it's going to work, I assure you. But this was a really fun experiment for me. And I think I'm proud to say that I think it's a success because we've played it 3 times now. And it seems like all 3 times the players have had a good time. So that's all you want as a curator, right, May?
Follow the fun.
Follow the fun, exactly. This next card, I want to talk about this one. And I recently added this, and I'm so proud that it's in here, more proud than I ever should be. It's like I'm a proud father. And the card is Guafa Hazid, Profiteer. For one, I think I heard May giggle. For one colorless, For one colorless and Azorius, you get a legendary creature, Human Rogue. And for Azorius, tap, put a bribery counter on target creature you don't control. Its controller draws a card. Creatures with bribery counters on them can't attack or block. And it's a 2/2. And he says, everyone has a price. So I have tried this card in other formats and have failed dismally. And then as I'm building this cube, and I'm like, oh my God, Guafa Azid, the Profiteer. And you know what? With the type of environment that I have here, and this may not look too great on paper, this card is actually super relevant. If anything, it draws hate because I've seen it get dropped on the table recently and during other games, and people realize the threat is there of paying that Azorius and tapping and basically locking down their creature. Sure, they're going to net a card, but this is how you take out their big threats, and it's pretty funny. May, do you have any thoughts about Guafa?
I think that it is the perfect example of a flavorful pet card that a Spike would scoff at. But that's also why it's kind of perfect for this environment, because it's the type of weird, obscure card that doesn't have a home in other places that can do relevant things in this environment once it's given a shot.
I agree, and I challenge any Spike when you sit down with me to just pass this card to me. Well, I'll show you
So
what it is.
I actually had a similar experience. Forgive me for kind of derailing this after I swore I would never talk about the Fey Cube again.
Let's go.
But I had a similar experience with, I will say, his younger brother in Quain, the Relevant Meddler, or whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just tap, each player may draw a card, and if they do, gain a life. And in the Fey Cube at that time, it was, this is an obscure, weird pet card, but it really works for the Control Mill deck. It was just at that perfect toughness that it answered relevant threats. It was hard to get off the board. It drew a lot of cards, and Mill doesn't care. Draw more cards. Go ahead. I don't care if you gain life. But Guafa is a very good representation of that flavorful pet card in this environment, and sometimes I think cubes get a lot more personality when they're willing to embrace whatever flavorful thing it is, rather than just always appeasing to the spikes.
I would agree. Min-max is not the way to always design a cube. And I have a 540 powered vintage, and I do min-max that, although I've toned that back. But when I'm building a thematic design, I'm always looking for avenues to highlight a card that maybe didn't get enough love. And Guafa, I mean, it may draw the giggles sitting at the table. Understandably so. It's paying 3 for a 2/2 that you didn't have to invest another 2. If they ignore that, sure, they're going to net a card. But this card in itself just does a great job of locking down certain key game pieces that's maybe taking your opponent a time to develop, right? They didn't expect you to Guafa Hazid. I've watched it happen. People are fearful of this card. They treat it like a royal assassin. Does that make sense? In so many words?
No, it does. And what I really like about these types of cards is that it can catch the spikes off guard because they aren't going to draft it. They're going to look at this and be like, why is this in here? Yeah, sure, the flavor's great, but this isn't a good card. But then they play against that card, and then suddenly their entire board's shut off, and then they're like, I misunderstood the environment, and I underestimated my opponent. And now I'm paying for it.
Or they'll go, you need to cut Guafa. That's way too powerful for this environment. Said no one ever. But, so I'm going to kind of jump to these next ones, but these play into that murder mystery, Tainted Indulgence, which will be in the show notes. Body Dropper, which is a Devil Warrior that'll be in the show notes. That kind of plays into that murder elements that I was trying to do. But I'm going to jump over to this next one because it is a signpost. Don't forget
life insurance. We should mention life insurance. Those absolutely are all three related.
Oh, yeah. Well, go ahead and get life insurance because we're going to jump to that one too. So grab life insurance. We'll tell the team what that does. Sure.
Life insurance, probably one of the better cards in this keep, if I'm being honest, is a 3, a white, and a black for an enchantment with Extort, of all things. And whenever a non-token creature dies, you lose 1 life and create a treasure token.
I love this card.
And for context, for people who don't know what Extort does, it's whenever you play a spell, then you can pay an Orzhov and drain for 1.
Yep, drain, gain. Yep. It's pretty great. I love it. You may be right, but I do have ways to actually blow it up. As you've seen, I've only covered like a few of the cards in the cube during this particular show. But what I want everybody is get the gist of what I'm trying to say here from a flavor standpoint, so that other people not necessarily clone this idea, but you can just take, like we said, ideas of other literary works, movies, bring them to life. Our good friend Stu, he's actually doing a Doom cube, and he's been working on this for a while, and he's keeping it super top secret. But he's designing a Doom based on the video game cube that we'll see sometime in the year, I think come in 2025. But we're pretty excited about it. Stu, I love you, bud. But another card is Black Market Tycoon that's in here for basically Gruul. You get a creature cat rogue. At the beginning of your upkeep, Black Market Tycoon deals 2 damage to you for each treasure you control, and you can tap it and create a treasure token for a 2/2. This is one of those neat cards that I think is kind of at a greatness at any cost type of card, and I wanted to include these in here. It's also important to note, too, and I seem to do this a lot in especially in a tight shell, like in Uberbear's Artifact Cube, and in this case...
Please say you have Thieves' Tools in here.
No, but I will after this episode. And probably should put Joven's Tools in here, too, while we're at it.
Ooh,
but
yes.
Those are terrible. But anyway... But hey, we've got a couple more cards to cover, and it's maybe I just want everybody to kind of get the flavor wins here. Would you mind taking on Lonus, please, May? Lonus, the cryptozoologist.
Oh,
I want to
the
point
multicolored card that we.
I want to say it one more time. This is on purpose. Lonus, the cryptozoologist. You see what I did there? There we go. Have fun now.
No, I don't see what you did there.
Cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency.
Oh my goodness, you got me. I got got. So, the Scammy Tech Bro card is a green and a blue for a 1/2. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. Tap, sacrifice X clues. Target opponent reveals the top X cards of their library. If you do, you may put a non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield under your control. That player puts the rest of that at the bottom of their library in any order.
I've waited forever and on the show, I finally tell everybody why I added this card. Other people have just been playing it. And they're like, whatever, this is a good card. I'm like, no, it's crypto. All right, but anyways, moving on.
It took me far too long to realize what you were going for.
I like doing Easter eggs. So I enjoy very much, and I don't know if you do this, May, but I encourage you to do it. I like putting Easter eggs in my cubes. You don't have to tell anybody. It can be your own little giggles and lulls, but it's so much fun when somebody finally figures it out. And then we've got 2 more cards in here that I'm just going to kind of cover, and it's just to help everybody see it's the equipment aspect of it. Gilded Pinions and Gold Vein Pick. Those are the 2 choices down here. And basically, whenever they both, enters the battlefield on the one, and the other one's whenever they make combat damage on the Gold Vein Pick, the gist is they make more treasures. Because I had to give the Desert Cube thing was difficult for me out the gate, and it's been pretty successful. But like I said before, my crutch was using the treasures to ensure that my players were able to execute their strategies. And I'm going to give you a real world example as to why I'm proud that I did that. Our good friend Bill, we just drafted this past week. I believe it's Light85 on Twitter. He leans over and he goes, "Anthony, I'm going to break your cube." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean? What are you talking about?" He's going to break it. You know what Bill did, May?
What did he do?
For the first 3.5 packs, he drafted nothing but lands. He was deserting the Desert Cube. I was wondering what he was doing to the left of him. He had a little pad and he was taking notes. He was counting. He was doing a count to the left of him and trying to figure out how many. That means everything on his last packs were pure playables.
Terrible.
I'm like, damn it, Bill. But what he did do was interesting. Besides the fact that he just had 5 colors all over the place nonsense, but it was funny. He's the one that used that killer service card that I talked about before, make those rhinos to climb into his train, which was pretty funny. He was getting in some sort of vehicle, so that's how he was surviving it.
I'd almost want to say, just as a side note, completely unrelated to whatever people are listening to at this point, but I'd almost want to say maybe you should introduce some either affinity cards or some 0-cost goodies, so that way if people end up with lower mana bases, that they can still participate in the game to some degree.
Nope.
All right, sure.
It's Monopoly. Sucks to suck. No, I was thinking about putting like
eat or bean.
Yeah. So I tell them all. I was pretty clear about it. Yeah, you're right, but the idea of the Desert Cube is I tell them draft 5 or 6. But I do, and he actually tested the validity of it. I did account for the bills of the world. So he was pretty excited when he told me that. I already did the math and determined that if one person did this, that they couldn't break the environment. I did a lot of, I was doing a lot of ratios on this, trying to make a determination. Now, he went a little extreme because I had actually counted for 2 players overtaking land so they can go 5-color good stuff. And so when he just did the one absorbing it all, that's fine. The only outcome that actually happened is our friend Nathan down at the end of the table. He got down to 15 lands at the end of the draft. Everyone else was fine. He was a little worried about the draft and how it would execute. And then at the end, he actually, I played a deck against him. He beat me because he said the treasures compensated. He was worried about it, thought he wasn't going to have a good time, but he had enough treasure generators that he was able to just to stay in the game and keep moving along. And that's where the treasures really carried me across the finish line as a curator.
Treasures are definitely your friend for limited environments.
Yeah, it really gets me out of those niches of the bills of the world. So
it's
we're going to kind of move
fixing,
over.
It's utility. It's everything that you're going to need.
Let's move over to our final thoughts. And I hope everybody enjoyed this. I know that I encourage you to look at the show notes. I'll also include in the show notes the link to this cube. This cube's a lot of fun, and I will be bringing it to KubeCon 2023. And if you just want to get yourself and 3 of your other friends, find me. I'll hand you the cube. You guys can sit to the left of me, have a great time, because this cube's pretty fun. I enjoy it very much. May, what are your thoughts on this cube and this design?
I'm a big fan of it. I think it's actually a really inspirational concept. From design to execution, it is a really brilliant execution. And what I particularly like about this environment is, like I've said before, you are developing this perfect onion of a plane with all these additional layers, but it also seems like it's really mechanically unique and interesting in a way that a lot of environments aren't, even amongst desert cubes.
Yeah, and I want to put it out there again for the listeners. I'd love to get your feedback. You can hit us up on Twitter. You can hit us up in the Discord. Please join that. But the community question is, I need a plow and I need an iron. And I need some really good ideas that jive with what I'm trying to do here. So feel free to hit me up. I want to hear what the community has to say. I'm really looking for those pieces that make sense to the cube environment. I'd like to talk about it and get your ideas. Other than that, we're going to kind of move over to the socials. May, this was really fun, by the way. I appreciate you joining me for this one.
Of course.
Right,
I'm always glad to be here.
Absolutely. So as we talked about before, we're super excited. UberCube is going to be partnering up with the Gathering Place for an Extra Life event. And on August the 19th and 20th at the Durham Convention Center, I'll have 3 of my cubes being drafted. On the 19th, we're doing Uber Bear's Artifact Cube, then Uber Bear's Horror Cube, and then the next day, I believe it's at 1 p.m. These times are pretty much on the website now, but I'll include that in the show notes as well. But at 1 p.m., we're going to be firing off a 2-headed giant cube. And I'm just going to sit back and enjoy watching people enjoy these cubes. And we're doing prize support. And speaking of prize support, I want to give a special shout out to our good friend Stephen Conenfall, who said he was a true believer in the Children's Miracle Network, as everyone should be, and Extra Life. And I truly appreciate what he did. He mailed the player. Let's just say the players are going to be shocked, because I've kind of seen what the prize support from the store was, but you should probably see what this prize support is. And I'll tell you offline, May. It's pretty. Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate what you did. This is really kind of you. And I've got them sitting here, and I'm going to be passing these things out. And if I see any kids, by the way, they're getting these too. So anywho, I appreciate everything you do for the show, Stephen. You're truly appreciated. So May, I'm going to CubeCon. How about you?
Oh, I'm definitely going to CubeCon, and I hope that we see everybody else there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward. It's my understanding there's like 120 tickets left. I don't know if that'll be the case when this recording releases, but you might want to get your tickets now to the greatest cube event in the universe. Here, I said it here first, folks. The greatest 4 days away. Actually, October the 19th to the 22nd in Madison, Wisconsin. Myself, Stu, Christian, Chris, May.
I don't know. I heard that they had a pretty good Rubik's Cube convention in the Quasar district out in like several light years away.
And May, you're fortunate enough that you're going to be on a panel, right? We're pretty hype about that.
Yeah.
More to come.
I'm going to be part of the Mind Twist game. I have no idea anything about what it's about, but I'm prepared to lose, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, let's go. And then you may have seen on our Buzzsprout, we have a donate button that you can press. And if you want to help the show out, that is a way that we can actually it goes towards, better yet, goes towards supporting the show. So feel free to check that out. You'll see it on the link. If you love the show, we would truly appreciate a 5-star review on your favorite player. This is really important to bringing people into the world of Cube. So if you're on Apple iTunes or Google or any other one that has the ability to give a review, hopefully a really stellar one, especially the ones that are May's on, that would be amazing. Because that really helps people draw people from the outside and check out the podcast, and then pulls people in from the Magic world to learn about this thing that we all love called Cube. Also, UberCube is an affiliate with Ultra Sleeves. You can use our code for 5% off your purchase. ultrasleeves.com/UberCube. You can look it up. The link will be in the show notes. I'm a huge fan of Ultra Sleeves. I've got to put a few more of them in my Artifact Cube. If you're looking to basically not spend all this money on foils, it is on average about $6 per Ultra Sleeve, and then you use that discount. But the Ultra Sleeves just make this really neat conversation piece out of your Magic cards. Opposed to, and I love foils as much as everybody else, but when these cards get passed around in a draft, oftentimes people will stop, stare, or talk about them. If you want to support the show, please use our Inked Gaming affiliate link, where you can get your playmats, your dice bags, mouse pads, etc. My son is currently downstairs, and he is working on some editing software to get some playmats made for me. Thank you very much, Ink Gaming. Huge fan of Ink Gaming. That's where I ordered all my custom mats from. And I believe ChillMTG got that sweet Dragons of Winter Night mat that he bought. Absolutely gorgeous. You can find us at Twitter, UberCubeMTGPod. You can reach us at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. We would love for you, love for you to join our Discord. Our Discord's getting pretty poppin' fresh. Hashtag UberCube. That'll be included in the show notes. If you want to reach out to me, I can send you a link. And we've got a Patreon. May, tell them about the Patreon.
Thanks for telling us what you're on. Now let's talk about the Patreon.
All right. Other than that, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube and say, Happy cubing!